welcome to the 2024 Authortube Writing Conference, and this is the first page critique panel. And today this session is a presentation designed to give honest feedback and critique of anonymously submitted and randomly chosen first pages. We had 24 submissions this year, so not all of them could be picked, but we do have quite a few that we've got lined up to read aloud, and all the submissions were randomly chosen as well. And we hope to cover at least 10 of them during the session, more if we're able to in this time period. And because we are kind of short on the time, and I don't know if I wrote this anywhere else in our script, but because we are kind of short, we probably won't be able to get to you guys' comments, but we are so happy and thrilled that each and every one of you guys are here today. And thank you for everything that you can say about the writer's works as we go through them. So, and I didn't intro myself. I am Shannon. I write under the pen name of S.C. Huston. I'm a fantasy romance author. I write about broken characters who face adversity to become better versions of themselves. And there's always love to find, but there may or may not be a dragon. So, and I also do have my next Kickstarter up right now. It is just the pre-launch page, so it won't launch for at least probably about 2 more months, but that's the next book, standalone book in the series that if you want to sign up for alerts. I'm also the AWC conference chair and founder, and I'll be one of the moderators today. So specifically, I have the awesome role of displaying and scrolling through each piece of work that's read aloud. And I also start the conversation at the end of each reading. And I am joined today by my fellow partners and conference chairs in the AWC.
Oh, sorry, I was doing 2 things at once. Hi, everyone. My name is Devon Clark, and I write fantasy and steampunk with snarky female leads and a splash of romance. I am also the founder of All Call Indie, a database of freelancers for indie authors. I am the publicity chair for the AWC, and this is my first year. And it's so exciting. But today I'm also a moderator, and my role, like Margaret's today, will be reading the works out loud for the panel members. And yeah, we'll raise our hands when there is a pause so they can give their input.
And my name is Margaret Pinard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author and also a co-chair with the AWC team. Happy to see everyone today for this 3rd annual first page critique, which is always like super successful in terms of like giving people very satisfying, specific notes. Even if it's not your work, you're getting to hear about what our lovely guest editors think about the writing. So I will be helping to read as well, and our wonderful panel will be critiquing the works. This panel includes speakers from this year's conference who have experience in the writing and publishing world. So let's go ahead and bring on our panel members and have them introduce themselves. DIY intros.
Shall we go in any order, or?
You go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mark Gottlieb. I am a vice president and literary agent at Trident Media Group in New York City. We are a literary agency representing a range of authors in the space of fiction, nonfiction, even children's books and graphic novels. And yeah, we represent a big range of authors. And oh yeah, someone shared the link to my blog. If you want the link to the Trident Media Group website, though, I can place that in the chat so you can get a good sense of us. Thank you.
Holly?
I'm Holly Rhiannon. I am an author-tuber, but I also am the CEO of the small press, the Stygian Society, which is based in Montreal. We're in our 2nd year of operation, so we're pretty new, but our team has quite a lot of experience in the arts world. And for me personally, I've been doing this kind of thing my entire life. So I think I'll be all right at getting judgmental here.
Oh, that was perfect. Hello, my name is Ariadne Macquarie. My pronouns are she, they. I am a published poet. I am also the founder and editor-in-chief of On Gaia Literary Magazine. I am the former poetry editor for the Roanoke Review. And I am both a fully funded MFA poet and a graduate teaching instructor at the University of Kentucky, where I teach English and creative writing.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for introducing yourselves, and congrats, Ari, on the news. So now let's talk about how the panel will work today. So for anyone new, our panel members have received the anonymous works ahead of time, as have we, so we can practice reading. And so we're all prepared. So Devon and I are going to take turns reading the works out loud for everyone to hear. And Shannon will be sharing the screen and scrolling so people can also read it if that makes it easier to absorb the material.
We'll make up new words here.
There's always new words. While each of the work is read, the panel members will raise their hands at the point they would like to have us stop reading the work. For the audience participating in the chat, please feel free to raise your hand so that our anonymous authors can get a feel for what the consensus might be. See, words and things.
And we do like to work with a love note and help notes model. And so what that means is at the end of each reading, panel members will have a chance to say why they would have stopped reading at that point that they would have stopped reading, and give a help note. And note that if all three raise their hands during a reading, we'll stop completely with reading the piece. And then we'll go on to love notes and help notes. But then if panel members wouldn't have stopped reading, we are asking if they'll take a moment to give at least one help note, something that they think could make the work even stronger. And audience members, of course, are welcome to chime in at that time.
So panel members will give one love note, something they really liked about the piece of writing. And again, audiences chime in, tell our wonderful writers what's great about their writing. And I don't think they'll reveal themselves in the chat, but who knows? Maybe we've got one here at the moment, waiting to find out if they've been picked. Devon.
Oh, I'm sorry. We did have a lot of awesome submissions this year. So we're going to go ahead and get started reading. I'll go first. So we're going to switch back and forth as we go through. So Margaret will monitor for the hand raises, and yeah, let's get started. Ignoring the flashes of lightning beyond the window of their 10th safe house in 3 years, Dr. Nova Celeste wished she could watch her daughter sleeping, but she could only see a few feet with her thick glasses, and even then nothing was clear. Her sight, her kidneys, and part of her lung were the price she paid for the first time doing what was right to save thousands of lives. She wasn't even out of the hospital when they tried again, almost orphaning her daughter twice in the month she turned 11. Did I see a raised hand?
Just
no,
one.
You're not monitoring for that, Devon.
Okay. After the first trial came the third attempt. That hour of torture became the worst night of her life because the men Nova testified against didn't just want her dead. They wanted her and her child made an example of to scare any future whistleblowers. Nova's soul ached with guilt because her choice made Amber a target too. Those assassins couldn't continue on John's determination to find them, or Nova's will never protect Amber. She was comforted, remembering what her grandfather always said about her willpower. You can do anything you put your will into doing, Starbright, just like your mother and grandmother, but never decide to stop breathing or that day will be the end. The bittersweet memory of Lester saying he was proud of her decision to save lives right before they killed him still haunted her nightmares. That was the fourth time. The fifth happened only a month ago, and the therapist who was supposed to help them recover offered up their safe house for the share of $35 million.
Okay.
So Margaret, who raised their hand, or did someone raise their hand at any point?
Yes, Holly and Ari did.
All right. So if we have you guys start off and give us your help note, why you had stopped where you did.
Okay, I'll start, I guess. So I think here an important thing to do would be breaking the paragraphs into smaller sections. That's one thing. But what needs to be fixed is pacing. as well as the action of show, don't tell. Like, I think that having Nova do something other than sit as she's going through this history, perhaps she's, I don't know, packing a bag to go into witness protection, and she does this as she moves around the house and objects appear that twig her memory. You could address how her breathing is labored to bring up the topic of her lung, etc. And the reason I stopped at the point I stopped at was because I could sense sort of an information dump coming. And while the first sentence brings us into the world, I want to know a bit more about that rather than leading into another event and another event. I had the feeling that the author is really excited here for the history and the world building that they've done, which is awesome. And I've done this, but they should slow it down a bit and give the reader more of a chance to really feel where they're at currently. And the page just in general tells us, I feel, too much before we're even committed to the character.
All right. And Ari?
Yeah, along a similar vein, I felt that there was a lot of emotional history that was all displayed at a very quick pace, relatively back to back. And I would have liked to seen that broken up just a bit more with a little bit of what was going on, a little bit of backstory on the character, a little bit of just more introduction rather than all of that information and all of that history all at once. I stopped where I felt was closer to the end of that info dump, just because I wanted to see just how long that would be.
All right. And Mark, what help note do you think would make this piece even better?
Yeah, so I mean, I can share some of my feedback. I mean, I do think it is a compelling start, and we can already see a strong protagonist taking shape. I think there's going to be, we can already get a sense that there'll be a nice mix of like suspense and some emotional depth and intrigue. But I think a lot of this is, I agree with what was said by everyone before. I mean, I think this is just some of the refinements in terms of like clarity and structure. And then it has a better chance to really kind of captivate readers and kind of lead them further into the story. I meant to raise my hand too. I actually, I would have stopped at the end of the first paragraph. For me, it's hard with these comments because, I'm not only looking at these things sometimes editorially, like sometimes, and this might sound like an unfair comment, but I think of things in terms of also what I'm looking for in terms of the marketplace.
Yeah.
So I should say I was more reticent to raise my hand than the fact that I forgot. I try to give people, the benefit of the doubt, basically. But yeah, that's my feedback mostly.
Well, let's do one love note then. And we can start with you, Mark.
Well, I mean, I with my feedback, I said it's compelling. There's a strong protagonist. It has some promise.
Great.
We get a sense of suspense, emotional depth, and intrigue. That's my love note.
All right. Holly and Ari, what was your one love note?
You want to work backwards? Ari, you can go, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So really the main thing I clung on to in terms of the love note is where you started out was pretty emotionally suspenseful, which I did appreciate because it is a way to hook the reader in from the get-go, leaving them wondering what's on the horizon for the characters. So that was a really good part.
Yeah. So I think that the author clued into some really good devices for building empathy and showcasing Nova's resilience. And I like the way the page ended also, as it made me curious to find out what's going to happen next in her life. I just want to get there more slowly.
Okay, awesome. And it looks like in the chat, we had quite a few hand raises all about the same time. So I wonder if that's probably, in conjunction with the judges, what they were feeling, the panel members. So lots of great stuff there. All right, are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay.
Ready, Devon?
I'm ready. I'm watching.
So number 2, what I probably should have said. Prologue, August 23rd. I still can't believe I'm here. That one night's events have led to this. When I turned myself in, I never thought that it would actually end in jail time. I squirm in my seat and anxiously wait for my visitor to appear on the screen. I'm not sure if the video visits are because of COVID or if it's always been this way. This is all unfamiliar territory to me. Somehow I've managed to survive the past 6 months since that fateful night with little trouble. 4 stolen lunches, 3 panic attacks, 2 near fights, and a partridge in a pear tree. I shift in my seat again and stare at the monitor in front of me. There's no real privacy in the visiting room of a lockup. Even if I can't see anybody else, I know they are there, sitting at a computer screen somewhere, watching and analyzing my every move, just waiting for me to do or say something incriminating. It's probably best to just sit quietly and wait. Try not to move too much or show any sign of emotion. Try not to think about that night or how much I messed things up. Just wait and hope that somehow the day ends with us both walking out the door. I watch the screen and you finally walk in and sit down. Seeing you feels like home. I am able to take a deep breath for the first time in a long time.
All right. Did anyone raise their hand?
I did not see any hand raises.
Oh, okay. Well, do we want to start with some help notes? We can start at the bottom. Ari?
Yeah. So I personally did not stop reading this. I thought it was a really strong intro for this story. Really, the only thing I picked up on was just the accuracy and the sharpness of the language you were using in terms of improving it, removing filler words like that, just, like, and etc. And just, using words that are more accurate to the connotations you want them to in terms of building the suspense and building the conflict in the scene.
All right. Holly?
So my thing, I didn't stop reading this either. I thought it was interesting. The one thing I could think of was that you have to be sort of careful when switching between present inner dialogue, past reflection, and present actions. This can be sometimes a little bit jarring in the page, though that could be the author's intention. Personally, I'd like to see maybe the actions singled out on their own lines. And honestly, I think that just that change and a bit of formatting would help a lot with the flow of the entire piece.
All right, nice. And Mark, your help note? And if you want to incorporate your love note, then we'll just go on back down the line to do love notes for everybody else.
Oh, okay. Well, I do agree with what was said. I do think, this does set a compelling scene. I think we get a strong sense of a lot of the immediacy and tension. I read all the way through. I didn't stop. I wouldn't have raised my hand. I think the line that really carried me through was, I'm scrolling back to it here. I think it was about, it was that second line that really did it. When I turned myself in, I never thought it would actually end in jail time. That just kind of carried me all the way through, because I was like, maybe we're going to get another whiff of that. Maybe we'll find out, or I have to kind of know. So that, I thought that was a really good thing that just worked well. But yeah, it's an engaging opening. We get a lot of emotional depth from this. It's pretty clear and has a good flow to it. I like how we're already getting a little bit of a sense in the atmosphere and all of the foreshadowing and intrigue. So yeah, we right away we get a sense of the character, the situation they're in, and their emotions, and that there's a central conflict. So I like just sort of how it drew readers in, and that it's sort of hinting at a lot of deeper layers of some kind of struggle going on. So I thought it did a great job there, just getting the protagonist's kind of internal turmoil and the atmosphere of their surroundings. It's a good start.
Holly?
So the introspective tone and the vulnerability and the protagonist's inner thoughts create an immediate connection. And that really drew me into sort of the emotional complexities of the scene. And I want to know what led up to this moment, and most intriguingly, who just walked into the room.
Yes.
And Ari?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Holly in terms of just that vulnerability was what really hooked me in for this character and getting me to actually care about what was going on. It was really quick too, just how that effect had on me. And just being informative of the situation and what the main character was going through without dumping the information on me really worked. Just having those little bits of history and background sprinkled in rather than all in one paragraph or two paragraphs. The introduction of a you at the end was really compelling to me, just because usually the introduction of a you is the introduction of another character that we didn't really get to catch in this first page, but I wanted to know more about that you. It wasn't that I didn't care. So that was a really good thing.
Nice. All right. Ready for the number 3?
I am.
All right. Number 3, Murder, Magic, and Maple Fudge. So far, my morning sucked. I misplaced the pecans and wasted half an hour searching for them. Almost burned a batch of cupcakes, and I was fairly sure I had flour smudged on my nose. The bakery opened in 5 minutes. Half a dozen things needed finishing, and of course this morning both assistants were late. Normally I could handle minor chaos, but not after last night. Not after my mother called, and she always insisted on talking, not texting, so I had to listen to her lectures. 5 minutes of her voice and all my restraints were triggered. Why do I let her get under my skin? Did she ask me how I was doing? No, just hello. Stop acting like a child and hiding from your responsibilities. It's time to come home. Why wouldn't she understand that wasn't home anymore? That I wanted to live my own life, not her version of who I should become. She hated that I moved from Toronto and away from the reach of the coven. Blamed my decision on my supposed immaturity. She doubly hated that I settled in the wilds of Nova Scotia, her words, not mine. It never dawned on her that I left to escape the expectations of being her daughter, of being the heir and legacy to the Grand Witch, Vivian Redwood. I glanced around my shop. I loved my business and my new life. Settling in East Haven Bay had been the best thing I had ever done.
Awesome. All
Wow.
right.
Only one hand raised, and Ari was the early one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we had a few in the chat about the same time too, so I don't know if those lined up, but yeah, if you want to tell us what.
Yeah, so I raised my hand about a sentence or two after this sort of resentment towards the mother was introduced. And the reason I did so was because I wanted that resentment to simmer a little more rather than all come at once. I wanted to see a little bit more depth to it. I feel like the conflict is really important to the story. It's just a matter of, it's one thing to vent those frustrations on the front page, and another thing entirely to let that simmer a little longer, like it were a chili, if you will.
All right. Mark, do you have a help note that can make this better?
I'm just coming down here to unmute myself. Yeah, for me, I think there are a few different ways to kind of like enhance this. It's a little bit difficult for me to say because I kind of got two different impressions from this. Like on the one hand, from the title, it sounds like it's a cozy mystery. But then as you kind of get into it, you hear about like witches and a covenant, some kind of covenant of witches. And then you think, well, maybe this is like a contemporary or modern fantasy, something like that, like an urban fantasy or something like that. So, or maybe it's both. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a combination of things. But it just felt a little cozy. And, in terms of the contemporary fantasy, these are like two areas in publishing that are, not all that easy. Some of them are making a comeback, but so that, I'm tripping up over different things, I guess, than everyone else would. Most of the ways I think it could be improved are in terms of just sort of like giving clearer transitions, just sort of smoothing that out, kind of help them flow with the narrative. And like the bakery chaos to the phone call, that could be a little bit more smoother. Or and then in terms of the visual details, like just using more kind of bringing in some sensory details like sight, sound, smell. I mean, we're in a bakery. And kind of like what the previous piece did, not to compare people, but getting a better sense of the character development, their feelings, their emotions related to the past, kind of deepening the character a little bit, just giving some more context to the current struggles, that kind of thing. And then I guess I'll hold off on sharing the
Love note.
Yeah.
All right, Holly.
So yeah, I think I'm kind of reflecting on other like similar things here. So the transition between the protagonist's personal conflict with her mother and the bakery's daily operations could be a bit smoother to maintain the narrative flow, and like simmering on that hatred, I think does make a lot of sense. Additionally, this might be nitpicky, but the first line gives the character kind of a feeling of immaturity, and I'm not sure if that's intentional. I feel that by the end of the segment, we're supposed to see that see the protagonist as someone who's mature and out on their own and being put in that immature space wrongly. So I would suggest something more along the lines of like, the morning wasn't going well. I misplaced the pecans and wasted half an hour searching for them, nearly burned a batch of cupcakes and found flour smudged on my nose. Just something that's not as like, this sucks, which sounds a bit more immature in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Love note, Ari.
Yeah. So I agree with Morgan in the comments. Primarily, this is a cozy fantasy, and that is my niche. And that's something I really appreciated about this, is just how well it fits into that genre. The main character's voice did shine clearly through to me in a way that did enhance the character from the get-go. And so for me, I personally would have kept reading this had the resentment been a little more simmering.
Gotcha. All right. Love note, Mark.
Coming back here to unmute myself again. Yeah, I think there's some promise in this work. The opening is engaging, and we have some intrigue surrounding like the bakery and that kind of magical heritage, and some challenges between the mother and daughter. So I think it's just sort of in the refinements, but I think that it has the ability to draw readers in, and give a good story about identity and independence and magic. So I think it could be a fun kind of book.
Okay, awesome. And Holly.
Yeah, I mean, I like the chaos of the bakery set against the protagonist's determination amidst personal conflict. So it makes for an engaging introduction. And personally, I have to say, like, I always am drawn to cozy fantasy, magic, that sort of thing. So I'm a little biased here. And also I am planning to move to the wilds of Nova Scotia. So I like that element a lot. And as other people said, the title is great. And I do think that I would read this.
Awesome. All right. Are we ready for number 4?
Yes. All right. Number 4. Michigan Street Demon. Chalk dust rose as I clapped my hands together. Setting the supplies on the floor, I slowly stood up, stretching and letting the feeling come back into my toes. I sighed. I was horrible at summoning. The newest assignment for my class wasn't going the best. How hard could it be to summon a small animal? Sapphire's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Ember, are you home?" Sapphire yelled as the front door creaked closed. "I'm in the kitchen," I said. Sapphire stepped into the kitchen, grocery bags in hand. She set the bags on the kitchen table and peeled her green coat off, setting it over the nearest chair. Her short red hair crept out from under her knit hat. Tucking a black curl behind my glasses, I walked over to peek at the groceries. "Based on this figure in the book, you haven't gotten very far. Do you need some help? I know a guy who's pretty good at this stuff." Her blue eyes sparkled with excitement as she pulled items out, setting them on the counter. I picked up the nearest can and groaned. A little help wouldn't hurt, and the professor didn't say anything about getting outside help. Tell me again why I signed up for this class. I don't think I need to know how to summon things for my security internship coming up. And why did you buy beans? You know that I'm not going to eat these, I said.
Anyone raise their hand, Devon?
I did not see any hands raised.
Okay. Well, let's start with Holly this time. What is your help note to make this better?
I mean, I really like this. The only critique I would make here is adding more depth to the world. Instead of saying, supplies, you could be more descriptive of what the person is actually working with, what the room is like. And I find that with this genre, those descriptions can be some of the most, luscious parts of reading. So you should have fun with that.
Okay. All right. Ari, help note?
Yeah, again, I really had a hard time finding something to critique. I will say something that did pull me out just a tiny bit is having similar descriptions right next to each other, talking about the short red hair and the black curl for both of these characters was back to back. And that felt a little off to me. I would suggest separating those. And then again, as Holly said, adding a little more depth to the atmosphere that you're in. So we feel like we are there as readers.
Nice. Mark, do you have a help note?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what's being said. I'm trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt just by, obviously I'm following along and reading through. But just actually where I would have ordinarily stopped would have been actually right after this sentence, I was horrible at summoning. Just simply because, again, in terms of things, I'm looking for or not looking for. But the kinds of enhancements I see would be in terms of things like kind of developing the character more. I think, we get a sense of the frustration, but kind of going deeper into character motives, and insecurities beyond the summoning abilities, kind of like in terms of more of the details and the pacing. Like, I think the pacing is good, but maybe kind of balancing more of the internal thoughts with more the kind of external actions, or, kind of descriptions to kind of maintain that momentum. And then like giving a kind of us a clearer sense of where the plot is headed. Kind of like, one way to sometimes do that early on is give us a sense of the character's sort of broader goals. What exactly is she learning to, summon and stuff like that. Future plans of a character, things like that. And I think the dialogue did get at the character dynamics, and we get a sense of the external conflict, but I think just sort of tightening it to make it a little more concise and impactful, just to kind of focus on more of the advancement of the plot and the character development. So yeah, that would be my feedback.
Awesome. All right, so let's move on to love notes. Holly?
Well, I mean, I like the way we're pulled into the world with this one, which is one of the reasons why my critique was based around that as well. Like the last one, I'll always be a bit biased towards magical stories because I love them so much. But at the same time, they can have that feeling of being overdone. Yet I think with this author, they've written in a way that intrigues rather than tires. Plus, combining the magic and the mundane right away gives us an idea of the tone of the story, which I really like.
Ari?
Yeah, like I said in the past time I spoke, I did really have a hard time finding something to critique. It was just the little critiques that I had. Really, everything felt cohesive to me and flowed nicely throughout the scene as we were going through it. And we got that introduction of the characters and the main conflict of the scene in a way that wasn't, abrupt right in front of you. It was flowed into the story in a way that it actually made sense without seeming like it was dumping anything on us, which is always a plus on a first page.
All right, and a love note for Mark.
Sorry, I'm coming back here to unmute myself. I mean, I like the sense of magic and, I like that the details that the piece begins with in terms of the chalk dust rising. I thought that was a really nice detail. I like some of the naming of the characters, things like that, made me kind of enjoy certain aspects of this piece. So I think there's just as much to love here as there is in terms of some of the feedback we've given.
Awesome. All right. We're ready to move on to number 5?
Yes, I'm curious about the beans like that. Yes.
Yeah.
Magic beans.
All right. Number 5, The Burning of Diamond Manor. Thunder shook the windows of Martin Haynes' little cottage as he darted to the table to stop a whiskey bottle from toppling over. He was too slow. Cursing under his breath as alcohol dripped off the edge and pulled onto the floor, he returned to the task of tying a noose. Can't a man kill himself in peace? He hissed, shaking his head, then threw a glare up through the skylight. I've given you enough chances. There was a knock at the door, louder than the rain drumming on the roof and the winds that made the cottage moan and creak. Martin ignored it. No. 2 wars, 6 raids you've had. Couldn't spare one stray bullet, even in 70 years. Mark yanked at the rope and grunted in satisfaction. Now it's too late. You're done, and so am I. The knocking turned to pounding. A voice Martin recognized as that of the sniveling delivery boy yelled from the other side. Mr. Haynes, there's a package for you. It's urgent. Please come to the door. Martin pushed a chair to the middle of the room with a foot and threw the rope over the thickest beam in the cottage. Mr. Haynes, are you okay? Auntie said you haven't been seen out in days. Fucking brat, Martin muttered. She's very worried. Please, for her sake, with fresh fury, Martin stomped to the door and threw it open. His vision swam. Now what? He stopped breathing. The sender's name right on top. It was the name of a dead woman.
I know it was right at the end, but
Got it.
Anyone raise their hand, Margaret?
Yeah, just Ari at the very end there.
Okay. All right. So we'll start with Ari. Why would you have stopped there?
yeah, I know that was an inconvenient place to stop, but personally, I would have stopped there. I wanted to understand in a better sense why the main character felt led to kill himself. And when I kept reading through and through that scene because I thought we were going to get introduced to that right at the very end. And we never did. It transitioned to another scene that was happening. And for me, that would have pulled me out, just not having that information right off the bat when we were being introduced to the story as a whole, right with that scene.
Okay. I don't know if Mark stepped away, so we'll go to you next, Holly, for a help note.
So, I mean, I think for me, just to comment on what you said, Ari, I think for me, it's kind of even the opposite. I like being left hanging, not really knowing that, and having this interruption that stops us from finding out about it. But maybe I'm just weird. I don't really have a lot of critique here. The only thing I can maybe think to say is that in that last sentence, there's something of it that doesn't feel personal enough, if that makes sense. Like the rest of this is quite personal, but would this person in their mind be thinking that's the name of a dead woman? Or would they be thinking something more along the lines of, but she's been dead for years? Or something similar, depending on what happened. That being said, I do understand the impact of that line as an opener for the reader, but it takes us out of Martin's head a little. So I think that the writer has to decide, like, for the impact here, do they want it to still be in the character's head or hand it off to the reader as, here is your tagline, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. And Mark, you have a help note?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. I think it's really just giving a little more attention to just sort of clarity in the action and, giving some variation in terms of the dialogue and the internal monologue. That was where I was tripping up. Like actually where I would have stopped in the piece was where more and more of the dialogue was external. Like, I tend to think like, people have inner thoughts and then sometimes they speak certain words or sentences, like almost talking to themselves. But when I think of someone just talking to themselves, like in paragraphs of text, I start to think, okay, that's a person who is just talking to themselves, not really thinking these things. So I think making like a piece of the dialogue like an external thought, and then the rest of it maybe almost italicizing it and making it internal monologue. And then beyond that, just kind of like deepening the characterization, enriching the setting a little bit. Like I was getting some vibes like Edgar Allan Poe type stuff. I was trying to picture that kind of room, and maybe I'm way off, but yeah, I think getting a sense of that. So all that, and then that would, I think, and also helping to develop the plot a bit. That's going to make this a lot more just compelling and immersive.
All right, and now we'll move to Love Notes. We'll start with Ari.
Yeah, it's a bold move to start with an opening like that, and that really paid off, and I do applaud you for that. I think with the introduction of the dead woman, that would have hooked me again. And so just having those back to back, that is really powerful, of just having those bold moves and continuing to make those bold moves is really good.
Awesome. All right, and Holly?
The intense atmosphere and the protagonist's desperation immediately drew me into the scene, creating this strong sense of urgency and mystery. Honestly, I love this one, and I would really like to see more of this story and see what happens in it.
Nice. All right. I don't know if Mark, if you're back there, if you want to give your love note. If not, we can move on to number 6. I think you might have stepped away.
Yeah, so to share that, I think there is a good foundation here for a lot of tension and atmosphere. It's more of those like refinements that are going to help bring that to the forefront. I think that's all really effective for making a setting that's really kind of dramatic, an opening kind of dramatic scene, obviously. So I think, that can all be leveraged a lot better, through those improvements, but there is some good stuff there, and it'll come to the forefront, with those improvements.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to number 6.
And Mark, don't be shy about raising your hand. We're all doing it, so it's definitely allowed.
Okay, will do.
Okay, number 6. I won't be able to see it now. That's fine. Number 6, echoes of sacrifice. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. The words rang through his mind on repeat as he sat silently, hoping the beast would not find him. As he peered out from his hiding spot, he caught a glimpse of the massive creature prowling nearby. It was larger than any feline he had ever seen, with pitch black fur that seemed to absorb all the surrounding moonlight. As if the size wasn't enough, shadowy tendrils appeared to wrap and crawl over its body, giving it an otherworldly appearance. Just as it neared his position, the creature's head shot up in alert. Its green eyes glinted in the moonlight before it turned and disappeared into the thick underbrush on the other side of the clearing. That fucking creature is a nightmare beast. I can't fight a monster like that with only a basic knife. I never should agree to come to this godforsaken forest. Because he understood these creatures came with a great sense of smell, he wanted to put as much distance between him and the beast as possible. Time was not on his side. He needed to act fast. The sound of a nearby stream beckoned to him, and he followed it until he reached its banks. He rolled up his trouser legs and stepped into the cool water, carefully navigating across the slippery rocks to the other side. Once there, he walked down the stream's bank for about 50 or so meters before he re-entered the water and waded back up the stream to the point he initially entered.
All right. We had some hand raises, Devon.
Yes, Holly and Ari.
Oh, okay. I think we started with Ari last time, so let's start with Holly this time. Where would you have stopped, or do you want to talk about that? Why you would stop there?
So I paused after the initial encounter with the creature because I was looking for a bit more development there, and it immediately switched away. So it didn't feel like there was a lot of, reason for that description. If you're going to say like, look, this thing is really intense, and then you know, oh, I shouldn't have come to this forest and I understand these things. Like I didn't like that switch there. Also, my general critique is just that the internal monologue and descriptions of actions could be more integrated to maintain the narrative flow and make the urgency stronger. There's something about this monologue that isn't quite as cohesive as I want it to be. For example, where I stopped, I never should have agreed to come to this godforsaken forest, immediately switches to, because he understood these creatures came with a great sense of smell. I think a choice needs to be made about internal thoughts versus omniscient narration. I would say to keep all of this thought more in the character's head, and it will make it a lot more exciting.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to begin to sound like a broken record here in a second, but I wanted to know more of why what was happening before we got into it. I didn't really have a reason to want the main character to not be dead when the time came to feel that way in this opening. I just wanted to know, like, in a general sense, why are we running from this creature? What events led up to this, and how the main character knows so much about the creature's characteristics and capabilities while in the dark and running. Just a little bit of those more technical aspects.
Okay. All right. Help note, Mark.
I'm agreeing with what's being said, and mostly I think it's just adjusting things for clarity and the sensory details. Like the description of the creature, a little bit in terms of the atmosphere, like the opening lines, we do get the fear and urgency, that sense, along with that repeated line, I don't want to die, which is actually kind of, to be honest, where I might have stopped, because I thought that could actually be, explained in different ways or shown to us rather than sort of told to us in dialogue. But I think that this did set, a good kind of strong emotional tone, and drew the reader in, as a result. I thought the description of the nightmare beast is kind of vivid and evocative. But I think kind of giving a bit more detail about its shape, its movement, is what's going to kind of give those kind of visual or atmospheric enhancements. So my thoughts were a little bit along those lines.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the love notes. We'll start with Holly.
Yeah, I mean, I liked that. For me, it seemed clear that the author had a strong image of this beast, and I liked that a lot. I think that pulled us in. And again, relating to what I said in the critique, but keeping it positive, just like that's why I sort of cut off around there, because that was such a good thing to lean into. And I think you need to lean into it a little bit more, the atmosphere and stuff, because you're good at that. Like, you have an image, what's going on here. So just indulge that.
Awesome. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really agreeing with what Holly was saying and what the chat has been saying. That creature's build was so phenomenally enacted in the text that I wanted that to be leaned into a little more with the actual chase scene. But just in general, your ability to have these descriptions is incredible. It is vivid, it is scary, it's bold, and it's what I wanted to see in a chase scene.
Nice. All right, and Mark?
Well, I think that this piece did a really good job of establishing that it's obviously a tense atmosphere and that there's a strong emotional core there. So I think just the way to make it more kind of immersive and compelling is in those other kinds of adjustments that, we've all mentioned. So there's something good there. It just sort of needs to be elicited.
Awesome. All right. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. Number 7, Curse of the Draga. Rain poured, heavy droplets soaked the ground and formed slick mud. Please, just a little further. Alessandro, come back. Let us take it out of you. She looked over her shoulder, but pushed forward, her heavy belly dragging her down, rain-soaked clothes making each step harder. Ah! She screamed as the contraction hit, bringing her to her knees. Mud and blood stained the tan-colored dress she wore. A quick look down solidified what she felt. The baby would soon come. Alessandro got to her feet and trudged on. The veil, I must reach it, please. Her nails dug into the tree that she used for leverage. Once again, looking behind her, the two men chasing her were getting closer. Alessandro pushed herself into a full-on sprint as more blood poured from between her legs. She heard them calling her name as she broke through the line of the veil. They couldn't follow her beyond the veil. No mortal could. She surveyed the area. It was nighttime. Only the moon and stars led her way. Ahead, she could make out a large old tree with nothing around it but grass for miles. She stumbled forward, holding her belly, when a sharp, piercing pain shot through her stomach. Alessandro lurched forward but twisted, falling onto her back. Blood sprayed from her gaping mouth. Blood and guts burst from her torso. Her left hand reached for the mangled lower half of her body as tears streamed down her cheeks.
All right. Any hand raises?
No.
No? Okay. Well, do we want to start with Mark if you're there, since you always end up going last since you haven't raised your hand?
I wouldn't have raised my hand during this piece. I actually really liked it a lot. I guess we're supposed to save what we liked about it for later, but
The help note, yeah.
the help note. So but I wouldn't have raised my hand, is what I mean to say.
Yeah. What would make it better?
Well, I think it's just little refinements in terms of clarity, bringing forth the emotional depth. I think a little bit more in terms of maybe dialogue and some of the sensory details. That's going to bring Alessandro's journey. It'll elevate it, basically, make it more harrowing and really engage readers more fully in her plight. And otherwise, in terms of things like, I guess, character development, I guess, I don't know. I thought it'd be interesting to maybe have hints or brief kind of flashbacks that could reveal more about Alessandro, like in terms of character and motives and kind of the nature of the pursuit. That could kind of deepen our connection a bit and our curiosity about like the backstory and the significance of the veil. I thought I'm trying not to say good things. I'm trying to save that for later.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of variation in terms of like sentence length and structure to give a little variety and kind of emphasize certain key moments, maybe shorter, punchier sentences that can heighten the tension during certain like kind of action scenes, which is really what we're like dropped into here. And the longer sentences are really sort of meant to slow us down and place emphasis on like a lot of important details and emotions. So some of my comments are really along those lines, but I'll hand it off to other people. I don't want to cover everything. There's probably other things I want to speak to as well.
Right. Do we want to go with Ari next?
All right.
Help note?
Yeah, so I almost did stop with this one towards the beginning, and I chose not to, just because the more I read, the better it got for me. But right at the beginning, we get a lot of this talking heads action where it's a lot of conversation, but not a lot of engagement with the characters themselves. So I don't quite know how to connect with these voices that are happening right at the beginning. Towards the end, we get to this moment of gore. And I really think if you're going to have gore in the story, lean into it. I want to see more of that. I want to see more details. I want to get more into the nitty gritty. And I know I'm going to sound crazy as I'm saying this. I really want to see if this is going to be a story with gore, make it a story with gore.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Holly?
I think that's funny what you said, Ari, because like, for me, this is so much more gore than I would normally read. So, like, you want more of this? How? For the critique, like, honestly, I just think this is a really strong open. The only thing that I could critique in any way is like in a personal way, and some other people have said it in the comments. So putting those personal things aside, I don't have a lot to critique. I think there's a little bit of word repetition, again, like others have said, but other than that, like I like this. It's a strong open.
Okay, awesome. All right, let's do one love note. Mark, if he's there.
Let me scroll over here. I think it's just vivid and intense, like a lot of people have said. And I like how dramatic and urgent it is. I feel like this author really, understands plot very, very well. And I'd be interested to see how other things carry through in the story, like character development and things like that. Pardon me. And yeah, I was curious to know where it would go. I thought maybe it could be, because for instance, romantasy is really big right now. I thought maybe this is like a dark romantasy or something like that. Or it could just be a dark fantasy, who knows? But yeah, I was compelled to want to read on. And so, yeah, those would be my like nice comments toward the piece.
Awesome. All right, one love note, Ari. See, I knew I was gonna say it wrong.
You're good. Yeah, so the descriptions were gorgeous and gorging and vivid and all these things that I really appreciated when we get into something that is gory. And I really did appreciate that. There was a lot of suspense that was there. I wanted to know more, especially when we introduced the idea that no mortal could go through the veil. I wanted to know a lot more about that. And I feel like that was going to be coming. And so that's what really kept me hooked, is after we got past the talking heads, it really built from there.
Yeah, nice mystery. Hi, Holly.
I mean, I think I already said it in my critique almost. This intense, dramatic opening scene really grabs your attention with this vivid imagery, and I think there's emotional depth there as well. And I really want to know more of what's going on here.
Awesome. All right, are we ready to move on to number 8?
Yep.
Oh.
All right. Number 8. I should have kept my black home. I am not resting in peace. I linger in the shadows of the old house, my essence bound to its walls of memories and unfinished business. Everything that surrounds me has been paid for by my enemies. I am not restless. I have an abundance of idleness. Through the fog of my existence, I look through a crack in the window, watching as an automobile pulls into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the darkness of the night. It comes to a stop, and after a moment of time and space that I can no longer measure, a figure emerges, stepping out into the starless night. An exquisite woman. There is nothing but regret and fear etched across her soft features. She glances up at the house. Her gaze meets mine as I cower behind the dingy curtain. Can she see me? Lord, I pray that she cannot. I was pretty just before, if you saw me now, the scream that would tug on your insides would tear you apart until the ringing of the sound pierces the night. I recognize the young lady. She's kin. I can see it in the sway of her hips, in her high cheekbones and full lips, so much like mine and the powerful women in our family. Powerful, yet we are all gone. Gone except for her. I do not want her to see me like this. Anyone but her. I'd haunt these thin walls or bury myself in the corners unseen for anyone else.
Awesome. So did anyone raise their hand, Devon?
I did not see any hands raised.
I
Okay.
forgot to.
You forgot to? Okay, well, do we want to start with you then?
Please note my raise at an exquisite woman. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, my stopping point is kind of personal to me, I think, but I feel it might be similar with others. When I hear this kind of sentence, it's too extreme. I don't find a lot of interest in characters who are described this way, and it makes me wonder about the character describing them too. Like a woman being described as exquisite seems kind of possessive, like they're being observed kind of in an object kind of way. Just in general, there are a lot more interesting ways to describe someone's beauty. Yeah, and I have a bit more, but I'll just leave on the stopping point there if you want to go to someone else.
Okay. Mark, can you help note?
My notes would be really with regard to kind of like the atmosphere and the tone. Like we know it's tense and eerie and foreboding, but I think kind of adding a little more depth on the haunting theme, I would have liked that leaned into a little bit more. And in terms of things like character and voice, like while the voice is strong and emotive, I think kind of conveying more regret, fear, anger, those sorts of emotions. I think that'll give more depth to our engagement with like the narrator's plight and all that unfinished business. So yeah, my notes are along those lines mostly, but I also agree with what was already said too. Yeah.
Nice. All right. And Ari, help note.
Yeah, agreeing with what Holly and Sam in the comments have been saying, exquisite to me feels very objectifying in a way that made my skin crawl, quite frankly. So I would definitely change that. Just being able to show the beauty of this woman and show the importance of this woman without getting into a little bit of that objectification. Also, for this being the first page, it did feel like a complete scene. And I almost wanted the scene to be longer than just one page. Just being able to expand upon the details of what's going on and, dragging out the suspense of the ghost catching sight of her kin. Maybe even going into this perspective of the woman as she arrives. Just different things like that to make that scene just a bit longer so we can linger with the ghost and linger with this just a little while longer.
Okay. All right. So one love note, Holly.
Okay. So I had a little bit more to say on this one. So I just want to add something more before I go into the love note. And this isn't, like to be a jerk. This is because I feel that this has a lot of potential and I just kind of wanted to speak on it a bit more. So first of all, I feel like the final line needs to be edited rather than, and soon so will she once she finds out the truth. I would write, and soon she will be too once she finds out the truth. Additionally, I feel that the line "an abundance of idleness" was chosen for its poetic nature in comparison to the restless dead and may have been prioritized for that rather than its context. We're also told that the character is enraged, suggesting intense anger or fury. These two descriptions can seem contradictory because idleness suggests a lack of action or energy, whereas rage implies a highly active and intense emotional state. So I feel the author may enjoy this line, but it doesn't necessarily make sense. And as a poet myself, I think that when writing fiction and being a poet, you can get drawn into the beauty of language. And I like this, but you have to sort of figure out how it works within the story. So all that leading into the love note is that the haunting and poignant narrative voice creates a chilling atmosphere, and it immediately evokes sympathy for the ghostly protagonist. I love the opening line, and I think that this is really beautiful and has the chance to just grow into so much more.
All right, yeah. And I don't think we mentioned, but some of these were longer than 250 words, but we color coded it. It might not be clear there on the screen, but the blue part we're not reading because that's more than 250 words. So, all right, Mark, love note.
Well, my love note would be in terms of, I think, first of all, I think the title is very attention grabbing. It's in your face for sure. I was reminded of I thought, oh, this must be something like kind of in the school of Jordan Peele or something like that, or even like that comedic horror author, Jason Pargin. He sometimes writes as David Wong, his John Dies at the End books. So I thought that was kind of fun and attention grabbing and could hint at what kind of story was to follow. But I also thought this was just sort of did a good job of evoking like a haunting atmosphere. And, you know, the sample is pretty rich with a lot of suspense and introspection. And I think it's compelling. And it does a good job of kind of blending some of the supernatural bits with the human part of it. And, you know, maybe it's going to have a good exploration of, you know, some things having to do with identity and regret and you know, I'm interested to see how it'll play out across other characters and through the story. So yeah, but I think it's a title definitely to keep because you know, it definitely causes people to stop and think. It gets their attention. So yeah.
All right. And we still have your love note, right, Ari?
Yes.
Okay.
So really for me, it was just a matter of the mechanics of the story worked really well for me. There was suspense. We got hooked from the beginning. The scene played out in a logical manner that really kept us engaged. Everything was firm here, in my opinion. And just being able to have that firmness wanted me to keep reading and wanted me to keep going, despite the reservations I've had with other things.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're ready to move on to the next one?
I am ready.
All right.
The further down we go, before I had even taken my first breath, I had taken a life. So why did Nix put me on this job? All around, the floating city cascades like a jagged form of braille, an iconic raised place card I can't read, spelled an overwhelming light, luxury, Hinduism, and greed. I have my orders. He has his reasons, I'm sure. The clasp on the back of my harness hooks with a snap, and the door to the flying vehicle before me slides open. It's a taunting gesture. The wind seeps the warmth from my legs and makes my head feel light. We hover down overhead an empty floating warehouse. In every direction, capital snatches attention like hungry, glistening teeth. Tall buildings protrude out from thin air, shouting advertisement catchphrases, attention economy monsters. With all of the hovering platforms, it's hard to tell where one place starts and another ends. Each leg I dangle over the edge forces my heart to quicken its pace. The worst part is trusting the rope. I drip into the abandoned building in the darkest hours of the night with a gun in my pocket and in order not to use it, with my mind begging for chemicals to scare away my questions. I glance up, always hoping to see the stars, but I've learned to make constellations out of the rich people's patio lights and ad-free traffic. The frame of the skylight slowly constricts my view the further down we go.
Margaret, we have anyone raise their hand? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, just Holly.
Oh, okay. Holly, if you want to tell us where you had stopped and why.
I stopped around with all of the hovering platforms. It's hard to tell where one place starts and another ends, not specifically because of that part, but just because I had been waiting a certain amount of time for something that did not happen by that point. So the introduction of the protagonist's mission and motivations could be clearer early on to provide a stronger narrative hook and guide reader expectations. The jump between the first two lines is wanting and something. I want to know what's the point of stating that they took a life before their first breath in comparison with the job, because by putting those, statements together, we need to know why. So what's the relation of death to this job? Is it a job where a life is maybe being saved? That could be said without giving away too much. So simply adding so why did Nix put me on this job, a job focused on saving lives? I feel like similar to other pieces, you have this author having a concept of something that sounds really good and not necessarily following through on the way that we want it to follow through. So that's why I stopped there.
And I see in the chat, Mark, that you said you would have stopped at all around the floating city cascades. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just sort of, it's hard not to be driven by just, where I would have stopped based on, a book I would think of, selling to a publisher versus reading for my own pleasure. But to me, I think we could have gotten to the floating city later, maybe through some other descriptions. My comments are really more so along the lines of refining some of those transitions, kind of deepening more of the character and their introspection, and kind of maintaining a lot of the evocative imagery that's there. Because I think that's a big part of any fantasy. It's sort of like the world building, that goes into it. But I think that, where I started to slip was, so the first line, before I had ever taken my first breath, I had taken a life. That's such a great first line. It's really gripping. It raises a lot of immediate questions and sets a lot of tension for the reader, draws the reader in. But then that sudden transition to Nick's and the job, that was a really kind of abrupt halt. And then that sort of shifts again into, okay, and there's a floating city. So I thought maybe sort of slowing down and, going through some of the world building, smoothing out these kinds of transitions, that's going to give a little more context or kind of a clearer link to all the sorts of different thoughts going on in the narrative. But yeah, that's a little bit of my thinking.
All right. And then we have Ari. You wouldn't have stopped at any point, right?
I almost did. I didn't, but I almost did. Really, what kept me going was the world building. What pulled me out was not having that why and not having that who. Not being able to fully understand the characters, just the characters' motivations and a little bit more about the character. I didn't really care or was invested in the character as much as I was the world. And even then with the world, I had a couple of notes, especially about just the naming of things probably could have been a little more creative based on the other descriptions that you've had in the past. You do have the power of description. And so things like calling the flying vehicle pulled me out a little bit, because I feel like with the world building being as fleshed out as it was weird for those things to not be named in a more specific manner. Additionally, not having the why, we get that there is some sort of economic hardship being displayed, which is why I read this sort of as a dystopia, is we get a little bit of that political discourse without getting any of the preachiness of any political discourse that would be added into this. But we get info that there is economic hardship happening, but we're not really seeing how that correlates with the current mission they're on or anything that's really going on. So I wanted to see those two connected. And that's why I would have kept reading, is because I wanted to see those connected and I thought they would, and they never did.
Okay. All right, let's move on to love notes. We'll start with Holly.
Yeah, I think we've touched on this a bit. And also just looking at the comments too, I read this as a sort of steampunk dystopian story. And I think that the author has a really, really good sense for that kind of world and describing it. And that's something they really excel at, is describing the world that the character is existing within. So I think that they've nailed that. And once they nail that, character merging into that world, they're going to be doing really well.
All right. Love note, Mark?
Yeah, I think the scene's vivid. There's strong imagery, some intrigue here. Those are all working, in this piece's favor. And, there's some promise in terms of, again, that imagery, that tension-filled atmosphere. I think it's just those refinements, kind of maintaining the really evocative imagery, that's going to kind of really help to enhance a lot of the impact and the engagement in the story here. So there's some good stuff at play here for sure.
Great. All right. And one love note, Ari.
Yeah, so given all my reservations I've had with the piece, there was never really a point where I felt completely pulled out of the story. And that is really powerful for the world building to be carrying me through this entire scene with the reservations I had as to why there wasn't a who or a why. Those are two really big senses to be missing, but for the world building to be able to pull me through despite that shows that you do have the capacity for strong world building, and does show that you do have the capacity to write in this genre in a way that is effective and is astounding. And so I really give you props for that.
Nice. All right. We'll do one more. You guys ready for the last one?
Yes. And I can't find Holly's Stygian submission comment. If you could put that in so I can pop it up at the end. Number 10, Summer's Awakening. I navigated Echo Park, my home, where the city's hum harmonized with whispers of the natural world. I felt a pull toward the Elders Grove, a sacred site where Los Angeles's energies converged. The grove was nestled in the heart of Echo Park, surrounded by lush foliage and ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets to those who listened closely. As I approached the grove, I noticed the air seemed charged with energy. The vibrations were palpable, pulsing beneath her feet and shimmering around me like an ethereal mist. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the power of this sacred space fill her senses. "Welcome, Summer," said a voice behind her. I turned to see her mother standing there, smiling and with an air of excitement in her eyes. "I'm glad you could make it," she said. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," I replied, grinning back at her mother. "I can feel it already. The energy here is incredible." My mother nodded in agreement. "It is," she said. "The Elders Grove is one of the most powerful magical sites in all Los Angeles." I followed my mother deeper into the grove, marveling at the beauty surrounding them. The trees towered above them like ancient sentinels, their branches reaching toward the sky, as if trying to touch the heavens themselves. The ground beneath their feet was soft and yielding, covered in a blanket of emerald moss that seemed to glow with an inner light. Moss!
All right. We have judges who raise their hands. Devon?
Yes, Holly and Ari.
All right. Which one? They did at the same time?
Oh, Holly raised first.
Oh, okay. Let's start there then. Holly, at what point would you have stopped and why?
So I actually raised a little bit late because I was following the chat and also my notes. So I would have stopped around that point of I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the power of the sacred space. I feel like there might be a pause after the initial description of the grove. If someone, like me is looking for more clarity or action related to the spellcasting ceremony and its significance. The most glaring thing in this piece, though, of course, is the switch between third and first person narratives. The author, I think, needs to choose one and stick to it. The narrative could also benefit from a clearer introduction to the main conflict or goal of the characters to provide a stronger narrative direction and engage more curiosity from the reader.
All right. And then Ari would have stopped as well. At what point would you have stopped?
Trying to touch the heavens themselves at that point. It was, again, that switch between first person and third person that really did eventually pull me out. It was a slow simmering that eventually built up. Just having that consistent switch between, it was really hard for me to focus on what was actually happening. Additionally, I understand that we are in this grove and we are in this magical place that is beaming with energy, but I don't understand quite why we're there yet. And I want to.
Mark, I see it in the chat that you said you would have stopped.
Because I was already starting to get that sense. And then I thought, all right, why do we need to sort of be hit over the head with it? Like, we know it's a magical place and we can kind of get a sense of where the story would go in those terms. And it just seemed like so plain and blatant like a statement. Again, it goes back to that showing versus telling thing. That's very much so telling as opposed to showing. Granted, it's in a piece of dialogue rather than plain narration, but I thought just there are other ways to do that, or we might not necessarily need that. I think more of my comments, other than that, are really along the lines of kind of bringing out more of the character emotions, kind of enhancing the sensory details, maybe giving some of the subtle hints at like the conflict or how the plot will develop. That's how I think the readers can be kind of further engaged, and like the magic world that's taking shape could be further enriched.
Okay.
Yeah, those are sorts of my thoughts.
All right. We're getting short on time. We still want to let you guys do your outro. So we'll pick one love note to finish it off, starting with Holly.
Yeah, similar to other stories here, I think we have an author who has an image of something that's really clear. And I think they have put forward what this grove is going to be like and what the magic is like. And they can see it so strongly in their head. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So I think just, take that and go with it and expand it to the rest of the story that you're working on.
Nice. All right.
Yeah, I felt this scene. It wasn't just me reading it. I felt like I was there. I could feel the energy. I could feel the vividness. Just the prose itself was gorgeous. And, one of the most important things for me in terms of reading a first page is feeling like I can be there. And this one nailed it right on the head.
Awesome. All right. And one love note, Mark?
Yeah, I think, the scene, I agree with what's been said too. But yeah, definitely it sets a very kind of serene and mystical scene for us. And I like how it also kind of weaves together some, elements of, we get like some of the natural world and magic. Yeah, I think the imagery is rich. Again, just love the mysticism. And I think the kind of magical world's going to be, made even better by just some of those improvements. So yeah, it's a good start.
And great. Thank you, everyone. We're going to stop there for time. And as everyone has said in the comments in the chat, I wish we could have covered more. It was really fun hearing all the different viewpoints, but we did enjoy the ones we got to go through today. Thank you for submitting, everyone who submitted, and I hope that is helpful. Thank you so much, panel members, for agreeing to come on to our first page critique panel today, becoming part of a long storied tradition, I'm sure. And audience, please take a few minutes to tell us about your feedback for the panel. So we'll hit that link to share that email had right there. There we go.
Yeah. All right. We do have all the links. We've dropped them several times in the chat. We've got all the links for our panel members down below. We are getting short on time, so I don't want to, if panel members, we want to just give a short line, where can people find you? Yeah, we start with Ari.
Okay. Yeah, my name again is Ariadne Macquarie. You can find me on Instagram at FlameAzaleas. I also have my link tree down in the comments where you can find all my published poetry, my literary magazine, everything else out there. But yeah.
Thank you. Holly? Holly.
Oh man, you can find me everywhere. I'm personally Stygian Pen, Stygian PEN. And then my press is Stygian Society. So I'm on, Instagram, Facebook. We have our website absolutely everywhere. I'm going to be managing a stream for my co-founder Pay in an hour. If you want to check that out, that's another Stygian production with the conference. And I will be on tomorrow at 10 a.m. doing mine. So yeah, we're always looking for new submissions, like I was saying in the chat. So check out stygiansociety.com and reach out to us.
And Mark.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat to where you can find me. That's my page on the Trident Media Group website. Sorry. open this link so that we can see. If you want to find me today, we at 4 p.m. On YouTube Live doing a presentation on securing an agent. So you can stop by that too if you like. But if you visit my page on the Trident Media Group website, that has my bio, list of clients, new and notable releases, and links to like a lot of my social media accounts and things like that.
Awesome. All right. Do we, chairs, we want to do a quick outro for us? Devon?
Yeah. My name is Devon. You can find me here on the YouTubes or the social medias or at dgambrell.com. And I'll pass it off to Mark.
I'm Margaret Pinard, historical fiction and fantasy writer. Loved being featured with Stygian Society's first publication and love being the recruitment chair. So thanks and shout out to the moderators today. Good job.
And Margaret is presenting here in a couple hours, so don't miss that as well. So. And I'm Shannon, your host here for the first page critique panel, along with my AWC co-chairs. And I don't have any other presentations. This was it for me, but we will still be on tonight for the happy hour. And don't forget that it's followed by a live demo from AutoCrit, which we got scheduled pretty late, but it's on the schedule now. So we would love for you guys to attend. And thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And we hope that you guys enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.